We are going to take the tire and wheel combo from this bike and we are going to put those tires on this bike. And the reason we can do that is because both of these bikes share the same hub spacing. That is, they're both through axle, and this bike has a 100 millimeter hub spacing on the front and 142 on the back. And this bike here, this mountain bike from 2014, also has hub spacing of 100 in the front and 142 in the back. If you have a newer mountain bike, chances are you have what's called boost spacing. That means that the rear is 148 millimeters and the front is 110 millimeters. So you will not be able to do that conversion if you have a newer mountain bike that has boost spacing. The easiest way to check is to simply measure it, obviously. The other option is to check the specifications on the manufacturer's website, as they usually list the hub spacing. Another concern is the diameter of the through axle. Most mountain bikes have a through axle diameter of 15 millimeter. Our gravel bike, on the other hand, has a through axle diameter of 12 millimeter. So we need to get a reducer that reduces it from 15 millimeter to 12 millimeter so it'll fit the through axle on the gravel bike. And these reducers go for about $10 to $11 on eBay or Amazon. The other issue is you might need to change the cassette on the mountain bike tire to the cassette from the gravel bike because chances are you don't have the same gearing. Last but not least, the tire may not fit. This bike in particular is spec'd for a maximum of 27.5 by 2.25 inch tire. The restricting issue is going to be the chainstay. Okay, here's our two front wheels. We have the mountain bike wheel on the left, and it is a 27.5 as stated, with a 2.4 inch tire on it. And on the right here we have a 700C by 40 millimeter that came off the gravel bike. And this is a carbon wheel, and it has a 160 millimeter rotor on it, which I failed to realize until I started this process. And the mountain bike has a 180. So mountain bikes usually require or come with larger rotors for more stopping power. They go as high as 200, 220, I believe, on the rotor size. And our gravel bike comes with a 160, I think standard is on gravel bikes. The mountain bike rotor uses 6 bolts to mount it, and the gravel bike uses what's called center lock. And center lock is a newer technology or a new standard where basically you loosen this ring here and then the rotor comes off and there's splines in there that keep it in position. So that's not going to be compatible with our 6-bolt mount. So it makes it really quick to change the rotor around. 6 bolts have been around for a while, so you're more than likely going to run in the 6 bolts more than center line. This is actually a carbon wheel, and it seems that the more expensive wheels come with the center lock, whereas you have an entry-level bike or a budget bike, it's going to come with the 6-bolt. The way to remove a ring on a center lock is to use what's called a Holotech tool, and I believe this is actually used on a bottom bracket, and this goes in here like this to unscrew it. You could probably use pliers, although I wouldn't recommend it. And they do make adapters for center lock. This is an adapter that goes to 6-bolt. Here's the center lock there. You can see the splines I was talking to, and there's the pins for where the bolts would go. They give you a spacer, and then you have this locking ring that you attach it. So there is a way to go from center lock to 6-bolt. And this is our 12 millimeter to 15 millimeter adapter. Takes it from 15 millimeters on the outside to 12 millimeters on the inside. And we would simply just install that like so. And that's how we get it down to work with this 12 millimeter through axle. So for purposes of this video, I'm just going to go ahead and remove the 180 millimeter rotor and not put on the 160. The bike did originally come with the wheel set that did have 6-bolt. So right now we're just going to put this on without the rotor on it. So here we have both wheels installed on the gravel bike, or should I call it a monster gravel bike? Look at how chunky these tires are. 27.5 by 2.4. Be great if I could ride it, but I can't because the tires rub on the chainstay as I thought they would. You can see it right there, but yeah, they're rubbing right there. They just barely rub, and it's mostly due to the tire profile with the chunk on the side there. If you maybe had a slightly smaller tire or within the specs of your bike frame, it might work. As I mentioned, this has a 2x10 on it, at least the mountain bike did, and this is a 10-speed cassette. This gravel bike came with a 1x, an Apex 1x. So as I said, you'd probably have to replace your cassette. The other thing I just realized was that the mountain bike in that period of 2014 came with a 160-degree rotor, or millimeter, sorry, not degree. This is the rotor that was initially on the wheel, so I didn't have to change that out. That's because generally the mountain bikes usually have a larger rotor in the front for more stopping power. And let's see, the front fork. This wheel clears no problem. It is a tight fit, but it is definitely rideable. And that's mostly because on forks, with the advent of the disc brake, there's generally a lot more clearance there. So I mean, worst case, I guess you could run this larger tire up front and run a smaller tire in the back. At least you would get some good chunk up front for steering. I know a lot of things need to fall or to be put into place for this to work. I even debated on whether to finish this video, but I figured someone might be able to make it work. Heck, you could even just replace your existing tires with the largest tires that will fit your frame. In my case, I would only need to swap out the rear tire for a slightly smaller tire like the 2.1-inch Mezcals I have after changing the cassette and front rotor. To me, this is only worth the time and effort if you were going to do a multi-day bike packing trip and wanted chunkier tires and more voluminous tires on a gravel bike instead of taking a mountain